why is Trump the only insurrectionist official? Not the average dweebs who showed up at the Capitol building to poop on the carpets and pee on the walls and deface the 300-year-old paintings. But why are members of Congress not being held accountable the way that Trump is being held accountable? And for that matter, I would add to that, why isn't Trump himself being charged with sedition? Bill Barr came out yesterday afternoon. The Supreme Court should keep Trump on the ballot because the Department of Justice never charged him with sedition. How can you keep him off the ballot if he's never, for sedition, if he's never been charged with a crime? And Bill Barr actually has a point, and I wish that Jack Smith would take that very seriously. But, setting that aside, beyond Trump, there's this, 147 Republicans in the House of Representatives and the Senate who voted to make Donald Trump president in 2020 after he lost by 7 million votes. And a number of these people were clearly in on, or apparently clearly in on, the planning of what became an attempt to overthrow our government that led directly to the death of 5 people that day and the death of 4 police officers over the following days. So now Congressman Scott Perry, the Republican from Pennsylvania, who apparently is the guy who was pushing John Eastman, he's the guy who was, calling on Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act, apparently. We don't know the whole story because the FBI just finally got permission from a federal judge to examine the contents of Scott Perry's phone. And even at that, they're very narrowly circumscribed in, whatever the proper word is, in what they can look at. They can only look at some of the stuff, right? Because there's this thing in the Constitution that says that you cannot hold a member of Congress to legal account for anything they say or do in their job as a legislator. It's called the Speech and Debate Clause. So if somebody gets up in Congress and says, I want everybody to rise up and, murder the governor of XYZ, and somebody rose up and murdered that governor, that person giving the speech in Congress could not be held to account for it, for inciting violence. You're immune from prosecution if you're a member of Congress, if you can assert that what you were doing had something to do with your function as a member of Congress. And these seditionists, these traitors, who supported Trump's effort to overthrow our government and keep himself and turn himself into, emperor for life, these traitors like Scott Perry are relying to a large extent on the Speech and Debate Clause. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, all these wackadoodles, or worse. So now there's a lawsuit. This has been filed by a fellow by the name of Gene Stilp, S-T-I-L-P. He's a former congressional candidate. He's a political activist in Pennsylvania. And he has filed a lawsuit against Al Schmidt, who is the Secretary of State for Pennsylvania, demanding that Schmidt remove Scott Perry from the ballot because he is a seditionist. Now, this is going to get real interesting. George Stockberger reports, the lawsuit alleges Perry helped push conspiracy theories that the 2020 election was stolen and advanced efforts to replace the Attorney General with a Trump loyalist. That would be John Eastman. Scott Perry was or maybe it was Chesbrough. I think it was Eastman. Scott Perry was a leading proponent of using the January 6th congressional presidential election certification process to disrupt the transfer of presidential administration from Trump to Biden, says the lawsuit. He's also trying to get any information on possible criminal activity, quote, from the lawsuit, quote, by Scott Perry or any other party discovered in this case, end quote, to the Pennsylvania Attorney General for potential prosecution. Now, this is where it's going to get real interesting, because you've got this question of what is sedition, which would disqualify you from being on the ballot? Who decides what is sedition and who decides who has committed sedition. Because we are, at the moment, with these politicians anyway, with Donald Trump and these 147 Republicans in the House and Senate, I think it's now like 120 some odd of them who are still in office. I mean, some of them have left, right? Kevin McCarthy left, et cetera. But George Santos left. I don't know that he was part of this plot, but you get the point. So, there has been no actual court proceeding. There's been no adjudication. There's been no legal process that has legally determined that these people committed sedition. Now, there was one guy in New Mexico who showed up on January 6th. He was one of the people on the ground in the Capitol who was running for county commissioner in the New Mexico Supreme Court. Worked its way all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they said, yeah, that guy committed sedition. But he was, I don't know that he was charged with sedition itself, but he was charged with the crime of being on the premises of the Capitol. So, you can build a little stronger case. But I think that we really need to start going after these other insurrections. And again, the timidity of Merrick Garland in this Department of Justice is just astonishing, just breathtaking. It took him 2 years, and he had to be shamed by the January 6th committee, by the Republicans on the January 6th committee, to appointing Jack Smith. And Jack Smith hasn't charged Donald Trump with sedition, which, still has me scratching my head. I mean, it's not too late. Hey, Jack, if you're listening, consider this. You can drop another charge against Donald Trump. Charge him with sedition. Let's get this thing before a court.